Welcome back from your postprandial somnambulance that Paul Zach told you about. Time to wake up just a little bit. I'm going to ask you a quick question about you. First of all, which of these two things sounds more like you? I'm going to give you two options, and option one will be you'll move your hands this direction, and option two will be this direction. So first question, I think it's more important to take my time, all the time that's needed, to get my decision exactly right. Or I like to make big, bold, quick decisions, even if they're wrong, even if I fail. Are you more like one or more like two? Now look around the room at a little bit of heterogeneity. Now imagine you're all on the same team and you can't figure out why this person is not aligned with you. Second question. I think that a lot of what our outcomes are dependent on luck, fate, it's written, it was meant to be, zodiac signs possibly, or maybe even God, versus none of that matters. It's only what I do that totally determines the outcomes in my life. Number one, that way. Number two, that way. Look again at the heterogeneity. Now, you have just undergone the most simplistic bastardization of two tremendous tests, and I apologize for that. But I'm going to show you the real power of the hidden who. And here's what we mean by this. First of all, a huge thank you to the funders, the patient supporters for this, which were MSD and Merck. This was the largest behavioral science study of vaccine hesitancy, and they were the most tremendous supporters, with a particular thank you to Jasmine Correa and Amy Bauman. I know you're watching back in America. Thank you. A big hug to you. So, yes, please, thank you, clients. This, by the way, is not vaporware. Together with my research partner at Kantar Profiles, John Poulston, I know you're watching, John, this has been 7 years in the making. And it's been tested by the research community, who could have called bullshit on it at any time. And instead, we've gotten now 7 global awards for this. The only reason that's important is know that what I'm going to show you, I'm more frightened than you are about vaporware, so I want to make sure whatever I show you is real. Everything that I'm going to show you originally came from long, peer-reviewed, scientific, reproduced studies that we improved in terms of methodology. So these were the tests that we gave 3,000 parents in the United States, and we're about to embark with my colleague Paulo Mercado, who is head of behavioral science for Ogilvy in Asia Pacific, and a larger study in Asia of some 12,000. So looking at this is a lot of tests. And for somebody to go through these tests, it takes 45 minutes, to which you're going to reply, oh my God, nobody does that. I'm sure they all cheated. Well, we built in little algorithms to pop out people who are not reading. We measure dwell time. We can tell if they get Likert laziness, 1 to 7, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, gone. So this is very clean data, throwing out people who are not really reading very closely, and a 95% favorability and 98% completion rate. So don't let people tell you that your research has to be really short in a TikTok world. People actually are very engaged if the research is engaging and if you give them self-agency. What do I mean by that? In our 45 minutes, about every 2 to 3 minutes, you get a little nugget back. Here's what we think of you. Are we right or wrong? Gives you a sense of agency. That way you don't feel you've just been data raped. So it's a really, really important thing. But if you look at these, what we were trying to find out over the last 7 years is, are they all separate and discrete, or do they overlap? Do they reconfirm each other in interesting ways? And when you put them all together, here's what it creates. It's pretty stunning. You all know what a genome is, of course. This is a sense-making genome. You are born about 50% hardwired for the rest of your life about all your preferences, choices, decisions, and behaviors. The other 50% comes, of course, through nurture, not nature. But 50% is a lot when you get popped out to be half-baked. And so knowing this and knowing that how you are wired on the inside means everything about how you are different from the person sitting next to you. When traditional marketing research told you nothing about any of these. So are you ready to see what comes out of this? Forget it. Here we go. So first of all, we tested for 25 separate forms of vaccine concerns. It's really way too blunt to just say, vaccine hesitant. What the hell does that mean? It can mean anything from conspiracy theory to somebody who's super highly educated who works in healthcare and says, hang on, in the past, it used to take 11 years to make a vaccine. How did it only take 11 months this time? Feels like they really may have cut corners. Now, that's not true, but it's perfectly logical sounding. And just because something makes sense to you doesn't mean it's true. So 17 tests on cognitive and affective behavioral science tests, and then the ultimate, 16 narratives tested alongside to find out ultimately what works best for you as an individual. Now, traditionally, you might do, well, get in a room, brainstorm, come up with 5 great messages, wordsmith it, brainstorm, test them, come out with 3 winners out of 5, recommend them to the client chooses 1, and you spend $1 kajillion in media and outdoor with 1. This, in an age of addressable and digital, is really addressed to you. It's not the least common denominator. So when you look at this, this is what it begins to look like. Now, by no means am I going to ask you to read what's on here, but look at the patterns. On the left, these are all the self-expressed reasons why somebody might be hesitant about getting a vaccine. Now, keep in mind for this test, this was not, even though it was done during the period of COVID, this was for parents for routine vaccinations, measles, MMR, things like this, not COVID vaccines. And explicitly, we clarified this along the way to find out if there was an impact during this pandemic on normal childhood, routine childhood vaccinations. And so if you look on the left, these are all the many ways people would be hesitant or concerned about things. And across the top are many of those behavioral science tests. So the first instance was, because of how you're wired, does that correlate with your concerns? And yeah, indeed, we found certain correlations here. So those 2 tests I gave you at the beginning, the first one, I'd rather take my time and get it right versus very quick, bold decisions, even if I fail. That's called regulatory focus, whether you're more promotion or prevention. And it even is seen in things like toothpaste. Did you know that if you're more promotion, make big, bold decisions, go fast, goes more with optic white type tooth whitening toothpaste. But prevention-focused people prefer cavity prevention, healthy gums. It may be basically the same ingredients, but how you're wired means everything in the choice. Not just vaccines, not just consumer products, but even how you react to climate change communications regarding risk. So this has really an impact on everything, and wicked problems to small problems. So this is the first sort of canvas, and where you see the arrows, you begin to see very strong correlations with all kinds of hesitancy with a few of these. Now, let me give you a couple of them. Now, high self-reported religiosity. We gave them about 6 ways to tell us whether they believed they were religious or not. And those who expressed and said, I am highly religious, were also very highly hesitant on vaccines. Now you look over here, this is called ocean agreeableness. Now you heard earlier, Keith Deere, former defense, now AI, was talking about Hexaco and Big Five. Well, this is one of the Big Five. And agreeableness is if you're very sort of skeptical and kind of irascible and people think you might be a little grumpy, this is low on agreeableness. If you're the kind of person like, say, Tara Austin, and you meet her and it's like, God, I got to have a drink with her tonight. I mean, she's just so warm. That's very high on agreeableness. But low on agreeableness people were very much more correlated with hesitancy, as were the promotion-focused. Remember those of you who said, yeah, I like to move fast and make big, bold decisions? Yeah, well, strangely, that correlated with more hesitancy. And you might have guessed that prevention would have correlated more with hesitancy because you're worried about ingredients and things like that, but it did not. So it's important to test. So if you look at this, again, all the tests we've given, and again, more and more correlations, you begin to see it. But we're not done. So if you look at the next level, here were the things that were surfaced. Some may surprise you, some not at all surprising. I told you about high religiosity, low on openness, but also low on conscientiousness. What's low on conscientiousness? Think Homer Simpson versus Lisa Simpson. Homer, low on conscientiousness. Lisa, very high. Homers out there were very much tied to hesitancy. Then you look over here, and a very strong one with something called need for affect, the avoidance part of need for affect. We test whether you have a strong or low need for affect about approaching emotions or avoiding emotions, and also a strong or low need for cognition. Do you want more information, more data, more research, or that doesn't work for you, you'd rather have a story? And by the way, there's no value judgment or intelligence associated with those. And then time perspective. We test for, do you make decisions because you're pre-wired to be nostalgic and kind of live in the past and make current decisions based on your past, or very much in the present, or very future-minded? And it turned out here, those who were wired for the present were more correlated with hesitancy. And finally, one you would guess, low vaccine knowledge correlated with more hesitancy. This is a key, because how many of you believe with a 75% confidence level, strong, that you know how vaccines work? Raise your hand. This is wonderful, because this is the first honest, not over-optimistic, overconfident group I've ever asked that question. We asked our respondents, and they said, oh, I know. It boils your blood, and that's why I'm not going to take it. Or, I know it gives you the disease, and if you live, you have immunity, but good luck on living. People don't really know how vaccines work, and that's not their fault. To use great metaphors and analogies about how vaccines work can possibly get you there. And there comes the creative side of behavioral science, the storytelling side of behavioral science that often public health and pharma doesn't embrace to the same degree you may. That's not their specialty. So let's continue. And those narratives I told you about, well, they weren't just some narratives. It wasn't like we got a bunch of copywriters together and go, hey, what would be a good message? We made little Trojan horses. We made packages. And each message, each narrative was a Trojan horse for behavioral science principles. For example, social proof might be one. Another one might be whether you're highly individualistic versus communitarian. And so we figured out 16 of these narratives because we had to limit it somewhere, and did such a profoundly robust test. Every respondent scored each narrative individually, and as we said earlier, Paul Zak said, yeah, but against what? Oh, the second round, you took 4 of your winners against each other competitively. So not only did you score 16 narratives, you had 4 rounds of winners against the other winners that you chose, and then you had to pick an ultimate winner, and then not just a winner for you, a second order test. What do you think other parents would think is the best narrative? It tests for pluralistic ignorance, which is an important test. So when you layer those on, I'll give you an example. By the way, these were totally based on, hypothetical or mythical or fictional characters. Here's an example. Barbara says she's always made it through tough times due to her strong faith. She kept hearing that people of faith did not need to vaccinate their children. But then her pastor, Robert Jeffries of the 14,000-member First Baptist Church in Dallas said, quote, "Vaccines are a gift from God." And that made her more comfortable with the whole idea. Then she also saw that 95% of evangelical leaders said that they were okay with vaccination. And again, another one like that. So here's what happened. When we looked at the total population of 3,000 parents, we were like, oh my God, it looks like we got a couple of winners. Number 2 and number 4. Number 2 was anticipated regret in social norming. Number 4 was overcoming the availability bias and using concreteness. But that was looking at all of you, and we know there's no average, and you should not look at aggregate. It's more like Kiki, not like Booba, okay? So when you look at it this way, this is what came up. And you now have a kind of blueprint to what makes us who we are with the hidden who. An opportunity in this messiness. When we look at identity and faith, different narratives for different views on identity and faith. When we look at your Big Five personality, when we look at how you are made to make decisions, different ones work, but they are reproducible and they form a kind of blueprint for change management. So I hope this gives you an idea that one, much of traditional research, marketing, medical research, too blunt. 2, this comes from proven science and is a mess at first glance, but ultimately is ultra precise compared to the old way. Is it a lot more work? Yes. Is it more effective because I'm addressing you as an individual? It appears to be. It's early days. And we'll keep you up to date with what happens in Asia Pacific because we also test, of course, for cultural and contextual biases and differences. But let me leave you with this. If you're not testing for the sense-making genome of that hidden who, you're just shooting in the dark. So thank you very much.